about infallible proof now. When? Now. 1 Kings chapter 17, I take it from verse 16. And the barrel of meal wasted not, neither did the cruse of oil fail, according to the word of the Lord, which he spake by Elijah. I decided to start my reading from here to place your finger on the precedent event that led to verse 24. Verse 24 says, and the woman said to Elijah, now by this I know. Now by this I know that thou art a man of God, and that the word of the Lord in thy mouth is true. How do we place this side by side with verse 16? There are many things God has been doing in your life, but you need one now. Can you please highlight the word now? Now. Verse 16 says, the barrel of meal wasted not, neither did the cruse of oil fail, according to the word of the Lord, which is spake by Elijah. Now the hostess is saying in verse 24, now by this I know. So what happened in verse 16? You don't know? There was famine. And Elijah left the city to stay and take a temporary shelter by the brook Cherith. And by that brook, God was feeding him. The food did not fail, but the water failed. Because what we had in short supply was a national disaster in that there was no more rain. How food did not fail, I don't know. Some supernatural supply was responsible for that, but we had a natural supply in the water that he had to drink. And God was not going to be giving you food and not giving you water to drink. So when the water dried up, the brook dried up, God now spoke to Elijah and said, leave this place and go to Zarephath. I have commanded a widow woman there to sustain you. So the transaction of sustenance was foreseen and foretold. And this person that God said he had commanded, listen. This person that God said he had commanded, he said, I have commanded a widow woman there to sustain you. This person that God had commanded now began to argue about the responsibility that God put on her. When Elijah met her and said, sister, hello sister, could you please find me food? And then could you find me water? And then he was telling Elijah, look, perhaps you don't know, maybe you are a stranger around here. There had been no rain for some time here now. And yet we are told God had spoken to you about a person you are going to sustain. It is in this meeting I will be doing a very special prayer for those who have responsibility and divine mandate to sustain you, and they are arguing. And they are making it look as if you are not led. It is in this meeting you are going to prove the fact that you are not a gambler. God said, I have commanded her to sustain you. You get an answer, you give me, he said, look, there has been no rain. And unless Elijah had insisted, which will also be my point of encouragement to everyone who has suffered denial and denial upon denial, please insist. Did you hear me? Yes, sir. You don't insist. There are spiritual indolence and devious fellows who are not compliant. And when God speaks to them, they have a habit of arguing. I hate having anything to do with such people. When God spoke to Saul of Tarsus on his way to Damascus when he met Christ and fell down, and the Lord said to him, "Get up, go to the town, go and lodge in such and such a house." He said, "Yes, sir." Then God spoke to an old disciple and said, "Go to such and such a place, you will find a new disciple. Go and lay hand on him and pray for him that he may see." He argued. He said, "Is it not the man that they say used to kill people?" There are those fellows who have become so familiar with God and they don't take instructions, they don't obey instructions. I don't like to meet with them because they delay your miracle. But when you are so unlucky to confront such, insist. Did you hear me? When you meet with obstinate and stubborn, recalcitrant spiritual characters, do what? Insist. Because that's the way they are. That's who they are. So the woman went and did what Elijah said. And here is the conclusion of what the Bible says. Elijah has said, "Look, if you do what I tell you, the powder, the flour, the oil will not be exhausted. Just do what I said." And the Bible said she went and did it. The powder, the flour did not fail. The oil did not fail. Throughout the time of the dry season, we're talking of over 1,000 days. And 3 of them were in that house and they were eating and drinking from a bottle. Sustained from a bottle. And that is the conclusion that we saw in verse 16. That the barrel of meal wasted not, neither the cruse of oil failed. And it was said, the reason why it was so, according to the word of the Lord, which he spake by Elijah. So Elijah's signature is still on this event. Elijah's signature is still on this event. Elijah is the one driving this event. So it didn't fail, according to Elijah's word. Elijah had this prophetic authority whenever he spoke. You remember the way he spoke to Ahab. He said, "There will neither be rain nor dew these days, according to my word." That is to say, when they ask you who said it, tell them I'm the one who said it. So, that signature was established again in verse 16. But in verse 17, it came to pass after these things, the son of the woman, the mistress of the house, fell sick, and his sickness was so sore that there was no breath left in him. And she said to Elijah, "What have I done with thee, O thou man of God? Art thou come unto me to call my sin to remembrance and to slay my son?" From verse 18, we now know the relationship between sin and death. That even at that time, it seemed everybody knew that sin are death, and death, they are neighbors. One leads to the other. The Bible said the soul that sinneth shall die. It appears like it was even common knowledge at that time. And the woman was highlighting this. That is it that you have come to recall my sin, and the consequence of which will now be that my son will die. There are those probabilities about where the consequence of sin land. If you recall my sin, then I should be the one to die. But when you recall my sin and my son who did not sin die. that Abraham needed to establish his relationship with God very well, and Isaac was to be the scapegoat. He will not die another man's death. Now, say, emu ese mi wa siranti ese temi. Ngba mese mi wa siranti ọmọ mi ló wá kú. Èmi ló yẹ kó kú. Tí Abraham bá fẹ́ ṣe gbàgbọ́, ṣe Isaac ló máa fi ṣe ọmọ ọlọ́mọ. Tó náà ní májẹ̀mú tí ẹ̀ tó fẹ́ lò. Bí Jẹ́fítà ṣe lọ fi ọmọ ẹ̀ a fi rú àjùmọ̀ṣe tó wà láàrin òun àtọlọ́run. Ó nígbà kú oníkúkú. But the point has been made that in those days, everybody even seemed to know that whoever sins will die, or death will just be invited to come and strike whoever is next, whoever is close enough. But then, the prophet said, "Give me thy son." And he took him out of her bosom. In other words, the boy died on her laps and carried him up into a loft where he abode and laid him upon his own bed. And he cried unto the Lord and said, "O Lord my God, hast thou also brought evil upon the widow with whom I sojourn by slaying her son?" You see, we are managing a national disaster. Famine, no food. People are killing themselves and boiling their children and slaughtering them and eating. So, that's why Elijah was also saying, "Hast thou also," give it back in verse 20. "Hast thou also brought evil upon this widow?" That is, you have brought evil on everybody in town. Are you going to also bring evil on this one that I am managing here? "Hast thou also," this also is to tell you that this thing is everywhere, but this person has been excused because of hospitality. He says, "Hast thou also brought evil upon the widow with whom I sojourn by slaying her son?" Verse 21. "And he stretched himself upon the child 3 times and cried unto the Lord and said, O Lord my God, I pray thee, let this child's soul come into him again." That is, the soul had left. So Elijah was recalling the soul back into the child. And the Lord heard the voice of Elijah, and the soul of the child came into him again, and he revived. And Elijah took the child and brought him down out of the chamber into the house and delivered him unto his mother. And Elijah said, "See, thy son liveth." And the woman said to Elijah, "Now by this I know that thou art a man of God,